Today, I'm going to be speaking with Anita Vasquez, who is joining us from the Ventura School District in Southern California. Welcome, Anita. Hello, my name is Dr. Eliana Ramirez. I am the director for the CARE TA Center. We are the Crisis and Recovery Enhancement Training and Technical Assistance Center for the state of California. We provide training and technical assistance to the 58 MHSA, that's Mental Health Services Act, funded counties, and 2 cities that are also funded through MHSA. We provide training and technical assistance regarding the crisis continuum of care and justice diversion. Today, I am so excited to be doing what we refer to as a cafecito. These are short, informal conversations among colleagues about hot topics in crisis continuum of care and justice diversion. We are really lucky to have you here with us today. In just a moment, Anita is going to share a little bit about her work at a wellness center in a school in Ventura County. And then we're going to talk about one skill and one resource that is useful to people who work in schools and school mental health when they're engaging with a student who is experiencing a behavioral health crisis. So for the purposes of the CARE TA Center, we consider a behavioral health crisis to be a suicidal crisis. It could be an overdose, it could be violence in a family or in the community, or anything that causes a really significant emotional reaction. It could be rage, it could be feeling despondent, depressed. It's essentially when our system is overwhelmed. And we need some help to kind of calm down so that we can make decisions and make a plan of action that comes from a real reasoned place rather than a fight or flight, freeze or fawn place. So I'll get into explaining that in just a second. But briefly, what a cafecito is that we realized that since the beginning of the pandemic, when people had to shelter in place, that a lot of us are experiencing Zoom fatigue. We're watching too many recorded videos of people sharing presentations from PowerPoint slides, and that rather we were missing that face-to-face encounter with a colleague, let's say in the staff lounge area or around the water cooler at work. And so these cafecitos are short conversations among colleagues like we would have if we were at work together, sharing a cup of coffee or a glass of water during break. So Anita, welcome. Thank you again so much for being here. I wonder if you would share a little bit with the audience about your work in the Ventura School District.
Yes, so the Ventura School District received a grant to open up a wellness center. We are one out of the 5 districts, and in the wellness center, we're going to be providing resources to family just to increase the access for them to be able to receive community resources, therapy, as well as peer mentoring. So it's just a space for them to have accessibility to all those services.
Thank you so much. This sounds incredible and so deeply needed, especially these days when students are feeling the pressures, the stressors from the pandemic, from the recession, systemic violence in society. There are so many different things. In California, we've got firestorms that seem to happen every summer. There are just so many different stressors in life in general that students are probably reacting to. So to have a wellness center sounds like an amazing new resource at the schools. That's really exciting. And you were sharing with me a little bit about your background. Would you mind sharing with the audience kind of like how you came into this work professionally?
Yes, so straight out of high school, I got hired as a after school program leader, and from there it just kind of built on. So at first I was like an after school program teacher, and then I was like a para educator, and then I just kind of did a lot of professional development. So then I got training in a registered behavior technician. I was going to school at the time, didn't know really what to do. I got my bachelor's in psychology, and then after being in working at a school district for so long, it just kind of dawned onto me that I wanted to be a school counselor. So then I went back to get my master's and my PPS credential. And then I became like a non-crisis intervention instructor. And then from there, I had graduated with my master's and I started applying, and I was able to land this wonderful opportunity. And give back to the community with it through this wellness center.
Oh my gosh, congratulations to you. It's a lot of incredibly hard work that got you to this point to get a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. Oh my gosh, it just is so exciting always to meet, especially young women and women of color who are super, obviously very bright and committed and talented, who choose to spend those talents for the community and for schools. I no doubt the school is made better by your being there. We were talking a little bit before we started this recording about what happens when a student is experiencing a behavioral health crisis at school. So they might go, if they're lucky enough to have a wellness center, they might walk into the wellness center, or they might tell a teacher, or maybe they end up talking to a principal or vice principal, or could even be the person who works at the front desk in the front office. Whoever it is that's at the school who hears that the young person is experiencing a crisis, for the purpose of this conversation, we can talk about it like maybe a suicidal crisis or a self-harming crisis. These are moments where the person's coping abilities are overwhelmed. And so the only thought that they can have at that moment is that they need to figure out a way to make the pain stop. And what we know from research on suicide is that for people who survive suicide attempts, many of them will talk about an experience of ambivalence, meaning that they wanted the pain to stop, and the only thing they could think of to make the pain stop was to die. But there was a part of them that didn't want to die. It was just that they wanted the pain to stop. And so what we know from this research on suicide is that when somebody becomes super, super stressed out, the brain releases stress hormones like cortisol, and it causes a domino effect where, let's say the young person has a thought that they feel overwhelmed by. Maybe their mom just lost her job and their dad is sick with COVID in the hospital. And there's something else that has happened recently that just pushed them over the edge of coping. All of those highly stressful thoughts can lead to that cortisol stress hormone flooding the body. And when that happens, it can cause a chain reaction in the autonomic nervous system where the person starts breathing really fast. Their heart rate starts to go really fast. Their vision can tunnel into tunnel vision, and even their auditory experience becomes very contracted. Well, the reason why is because back when we were cave people, if we were faced with a saber-toothed tiger, for example, we needed to be able to fight or flight really fast. And in order to do that, we needed to be able to suddenly mobilize our energy. So that's why the heart starts going really fast, pumping blood throughout the body so that our arms and legs can pump and get us away from the saber-toothed tiger. Same is true for our lungs, our breathing faster, right? And our vision getting more specific, and our sound, our auditory becoming more contracted as well. Both of those things help us to get away from the danger, focus on the danger and be able to get away from it. But for the student who's in school, who has these thoughts that are becoming overwhelming, they release the cortisol hormone. It's an automatic process. That's why it's called autonomic system. And then it causes the heart, the lungs, the eyes, the ears to change in how they work. Suddenly, that physiological reaction is reinforcing to the brain, because suddenly it feels like I'm being chased by a saber-toothed tiger because my heart's pounding and my breathing is so fast. So the question is, how do we help young people and people of any age when they're having that autonomic process to slow down, what we call down regulating, so that they're able to make a decision that will be coming from a place of conscious thought rather than I need to get away from this saber-toothed tiger or other situation that's causing so much stress. I know we were talking earlier, Anita, about how in schools will have a crisis protocol. So there's a series of steps that staff are supposed to go through, and each school's protocol might be slightly different. Oftentimes, protocols might include something like call the crisis line or call a mobile crisis unit. this is wonderful to have that phone number to call. Maybe the young person gets on the crisis line and the person who's answering the crisis line call determines that, yep, we really need to send the mobile crisis unit over to assess the safety for the young person and to figure out what the next step is. Well, what happens is there's a window period for the staff person who's sitting there with the student while they're waiting for the mobile crisis unit to arrive. Or maybe if a parent is called, they're waiting for the parent to arrive. And so what we're doing here today is to talk about one skill that can help the staff person help the student get through that window period to down regulate, to slow down the body. And I know you were talking before about having had an experience where there was a young person who presented who was having thoughts of self-harm. They were feeling overwhelmed. And that the outcome ended up being that their parent came to pick them up. Luckily, that parent was fairly close by, so it wasn't a long time that you were sitting there with the student in distress. But we know in any part of California, we've got some serious traffic to deal with. Maybe it's not traffic. Maybe it's trying to reach a parent who's working, who can't get away from work immediately. That there are any number of reasons why you could have been sitting there with a young person in distress for a longer period of time. So we were going to talk a little bit about this technique that's called cold therapy technique. And I wonder if you could talk just for a second before we go into talking about the cold therapy technique that anyone can do. If you might share a little bit about what it was like for you when you were sitting with the young person in that waiting period time.
Yes, so while I was sitting with this young student, it's just a lot of things go through your head. Like, are you meeting the protocol? What is accessible right now to help them to direct their attention to something else? Are you doing everything you can to make them feel comfortable and safe at the moment? But even while you're trying to call the crisis team or call their parent, you don't want to leave them alone or unoccupied and things like that. So it's giving them something small to do. And I know you're going to talk about a skill or a resource, but at the moment I had like coloring books. I did have some snacks. So it's just giving them something so they don't feel like I'm leaving them off, but I need to make this call or things like that. So I'm excited to hear about what you have to share with us that we can use and incorporate while we find ourselves in those moments.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing these brilliant ideas of having a coloring book and having snacks. That makes perfect sense, right? Because if we are eating something, that's causing that autonomic system, right, to shift gears a little bit. Suddenly, we are starting to digest food. And it's something to focus on that's not the super stressful, overwhelming thought. That's brilliant. Also, what you talked about with a coloring book, what a great idea, because it's a quiet activity where you can sit and focus. Again, something that's distracting away from the overwhelming thought, but also something that you can have a sense of accomplishment, that you've colored in a certain area. And it's kind of an activity that's quiet and relaxes probably the central nervous system. Those are great strategies to have on hand. So the cold therapy strategy is, it can be done in any number of ways. It can be getting into a really cold shower. It can be jumping into a cold swimming pool. It can even be putting one's face into really cold water. When we put our faces into really cold water, it's only for a matter of seconds, like 20 to 30 seconds. We don't want people to feel like they can't breathe, but they do it in cycles where they would put their face in a cold water for 30 seconds. And then they would come out and they would breathe. And then they would, for 30 seconds, they go back in for 30 seconds, and then they would come back out. It turns out that the nervous system, when we are exposed to really cold stimuli, it can, again, slow down that central nervous system. So it's interrupting this chain reaction of very stressful thought, release of stress hormones, which causes these systems in our body to work really hard, which sends a reinforcing message to the brain that, yes, we need to fight, flight, freeze, or flee. And so The problem is, though, if you're sitting in a school, if you're in a wellness center or you're in a classroom or even the front office, you probably don't have a pool right in front of you that you can tell a kid to jump into, and they wouldn't necessarily want to anyway. What we might have available, though, is a bag of ice, or we might have some frozen peas that we could put into a freezer. So the bag of ice might come from like a nurse's office that you were saying before, or somebody might have a little mini fridge in their classroom or in the staff lounge, and you could put in a bag of frozen peas ahead of time. If you take something really cold like that, you can put it on the forehead, or you can put it on the neck underneath the bottom of the skull. Again, you don't want to leave it on so long that you end up with the skin feeling irritated. So you can do on for 20 or 30 seconds and then off for 20, 30 seconds. If you do that repeatedly, it can really help for some people to slow down that autonomic system. And so I want to share with you a video that comes from a website called Now Matters Now. And I think for anyone, whether we're trained mental health clinicians or we are work in a school, maybe from the front office to even working in a lunch hall. Oh, we've got something coming up here. Wherever you're working in the school, you might find that, of course, this is coming up right now. It's helpful to see these videos. So what I'm going to do right now is, this is not coming up for me. It's just not letting me close. Okay, so Now Matters Now website. And so I'm going to do this for Amanda, who is going to record, to do the post editing of this recording. Amanda, go back just a few moments, please, until I tried to switch over to this website. Clip it there, and then we're going to start now. Okay, so now I'm showing you this Now Matters Now website. It's an amazing resource. Dr. Ursula Whiteside, this is her here. She is a psychologist who has put together this website with a variety of videos of people who have experienced suicidal crisis, sharing how they cope with recurring suicidal ideation. And she also shares a number of skills from dialectical behavioral therapy. This cold water technique is one of those. And so this video is, she's actually showing you how to do placing the face in cold water for 30 seconds in, 30 seconds out. And she's showing you how to do that with another person, Diana. There's also another video where she's actually recording herself in a moment of high stress, and she gets into cold water and she is recording the number of heartbeats that she has per minute and telling you how she's calming down. So you can actually hear it in her voice that she's calming down the longer that she's in the cold water, but you can also use biofeedback and hear that her heart rate is actually going down. These are really great videos for any person who works at a school to watch, to understand what this process is like, so that if they're in a situation with a student, they can say, hey, would you like to try this to help calm down right now? I can get the bag of frozen peas or the ice and we can try it together, again, on the forehead or on the back of the neck. The second thing, so that's one skill. The second thing that I'd like to share with you is a resource. So I'm going to go over now to our Care TA Center website. Again, we're the Crisis and Recovery Enhancement Center. If you were to go up to this resources tab and go down to the bottom, which is highlighted in gold, California County Crisis Continuum Asset Map, this page will show up, which is a map that has resources from across the state of California that are for crisis continuum of care and justice diversion. And if you go in here, you can search by your county. So I'm going to pull this down here so you can see it. So here's our asset map. You can either select the actual county by going and putting your cursor on the county, or you can select it here through this list. So I'm going to pull up for us Ventura County, and we can see what is available in Ventura County. So when I select Ventura County, down here is where all of the programs populate. Now, if I knew that I was looking for something specific, just crisis continuum of care services, for example, I could just select that. But what I did is I left it all programs and all classifications. And so what comes up for Ventura County, you all have 26 programs from the county level that are funded through MHSA that relate to crisis continuum of care and justice diversion. And so if you go in here and start to look around, you've got resources for adults. You've also got several resources for children and youth. For example, there is this Children's Intensive Response Team. So this is a 24/7 mental health crisis hotline and mobile crisis response program that are available to children and youth under the ages of 21. So this resource I really encourage for anyone who works in a school, whether they're the school mental health leader or they're a teacher or they work in the front office or they're the principal or vice principal. When you're not in a moment of crisis, it's a great idea to look at this to figure out what the resources are in the community. So that way you're ready when the student comes in who's in a moment of crisis to have those resources immediately on hand. And you've got the skill of cold water, cold intervention to use to help them, as well as what you shared, Anita, the ideas around snacks and coloring books as well. So I'll stop.
Oh, sorry.
No, please
I think
go
that's
ahead.
a great resource. Thank you for sharing that. Like I told you earlier, sometimes we need a quick search engine. So as somebody who is fairly new, sometimes you just need something to be able to look at and read the description to know what to give to a student for a resource and have them walk out with some resource in hand. So that's a really good tool. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here and talking a little bit about what it's like when a student presents in a moment of crisis. Again, congratulations to you and especially to Ventura County for having such a bright and committed person on staff. I know that you do great work for the students and for the school community as well. So thank you so much, Anita.